Well, government has decided to reduce South Africa's inflation target to 3% with a 1 percentage point tolerance band. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana says the 1 percentage point band provides flexibility to accommodate any unexpected inflationary shocks. Godongwana presented the medium-term budget policy statement at a sitting of the National Assembly at the Good Hope Chamber in Parliament yesterday. The Finance Minister joins us now to discuss his medium-term budget statement. Minister, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you very, very much. And I do have to, I suppose, start on a high note, because there was a lot of good news coming out of yesterday's budget. The midterm budget, and I think we needed this.
Thank you very much. I also think there's been too much negativity. At least I'm glad that we've been able to generate some positive positivity within the South African society.
Yeah, I mean, we'll start off here looking at the state's primary budget surplus. I mean, it's set to grow to 68.5 billion rand in the 2025-26 financial year. Does this mean that the National Treasury's fiscal strategy for South Africa is well on track?
Our strategy is well on track. You will recall we've always said that we will reach the peak of the debt to GDP in 25-26 financial year. What that means, we needed to build building blocks to achieve that. And those building blocks include having a primary surplus. By its very nature, it is then have an impact on a debt trajectory. That's what has happened.
Yeah, I mean, we also look at stabilizing state debt, and that's been a great worry. It really has been for many watching on. Stabilizing debt at 77.9% of GDP. Does this mean that Treasury is on a strong trajectory to reach that surplus of 2.5% of GDP in 2028-29 as projected?
Yeah, and I mean, in economics, they use a term called assuming everything remains constant, assuming that there are no changes or shocks in the economy. That's the trajectory we think we'll be able to reach. And again, I make the qualification assuming that everything remains constant.
Well, that's what we can hope for. I mean, the one thing that I think took a lot of people by surprise, but perhaps not by surprise, but one where we need to focus a little bit on is the factors influencing government to reduce South Africa's inflation target to 3%. I mean, this is something we haven't heard in years. And I mean, this is, again, another positive move. So perhaps talk to us about the factors that led to this decision.
Reading this morning some of people criticizing it, but there's absolutely a lack of understanding what has been happening in inflation in South Africa. As we speak, inflation is already hovering around 3% for starters. Secondly, inflation is good for the economy because it influences another variable, which is the interest rate.
Minister, this is such an important point, and I seem to be losing you on this connection. I don't know.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
That sounds much better. I think maybe it was just your voice disappearing as well. Perhaps you want to pick that up, because this is a very important point.
Yeah, I'm saying a lower inflation is good for the economy because it influences another variable, and that variable is interest rate. If inflation is going up, then the central bank is bound to increase interest rate to contain inflation. But if inflation is going down, the central bank also follows suit by reducing interest rates. A reduction in interest rate has got positive spin-off in both for the investment community, in the sense that the borrowing costs come down, and also for households like myself and you. Because it reduces the cost of living. Let me just make a particular an example. Young people now who are coming into the market, who have just got some jobs, who want to have been first-time buyers for cars or first-time buyer for an apartment, the cost of borrowing then comes down, and it reduces increases their ability to be able to purchase these assets.
Now, unions disagree with you, though. They argue against a lower inflation target on the grounds that it would curtail economic growth. How do you convince them otherwise? How do you convince them about the benefits of a lower inflation target?
Lower inflation will increase growth. The logic of that argument, it suggests that your transition towards a lower inflation will be accompanied by raising higher interest rates in order to force inflation down. That argument is not sustainable in the current environment in South Africa because already inflation is already hovering around 3%. What that means, in fact, the central bank has said in its July statement that there's a possibility of about 5 cuts in interest between now and interest rate between now and 2027. Therefore, a cut in interest rate cannot be a constraint to growth. So that's where this argument becomes flawed.
Yeah. And the reality is, and I mean, you speak to cuts because we may see the effect as early as next week, because next week is a decision on interest rates. And there is, especially after hearing this midterm budget, there's great expectations that there will be another cut coming of 25 basis points next week. So we're on this trajectory already.
Yes, most analysts after yesterday are also predicting a cut in interest rate. I'm not saying there's going to be a cut.
No, it's a prediction.
The governor would kill me if I say that. That is area of work.
Yeah.
But all I can say is that all of us, we expect in the current environment, there's no basis why they should not be cutting interest rate.
Yeah, indeed. And I mean, these are all sort of predictions, and we're hearing what economists are saying after this, that they do expect this announcement. And another expectation from some of the economists and many out there is that after this target of between the 3% inflation target, we could also see the ratings agency S&P raising our rating and upgrading us again, something we haven't seen in a while. So it feels like something's shifting here, Minister.
Yeah, I mean, we are of the view that if you look our fiscal metric, look at our fiscal metrics, and look at other economies with a similar metrics, they are at higher grade than we are, and we don't see why the rating agencies should not be responding positively to our performance and therefore upgrade us.
Well, let's see what happens on Friday. But now, just in terms of SARS as well, 20 billion rand in additional tax measures for 2026 could be withdrawn if SARS actually fulfills its end of the bargain and collects more debt as promised. However, SARS's data for the 6 months of the year showed that debt collections remain below estimates, undershooting by about 700 million rand. What's your sort of idea about this? Are we in that direction or not? What are you feeling?
Look, what we have done is to try and anticipate that. If you see in the revenue that we've collected, which is higher this financial year, with 19.7 billion rand, we are not spending all of that. We're spending 15.8 billion of that. We're keeping 4 billion as a contingent in case SARS does not collect the full 20 billion rand, so that we should not upset our fiscal framework.
So, Minister, I know I don't have too much time with you, but I think one of the most important, and it would be wrong of me not to go in terms of talking about the average South African, because the cost of living is the highest it's ever been, and South Africans are struggling at the moment. So you and I having a high-level conversation about, these collections and this revenue and this growth and all of that, but then you've still got South Africans sitting, looking on saying, yeah, but I'm struggling and I can barely put food on the table. So perhaps we can address this high cost of living and how this budget is hopefully going to assist. Obviously, the VAT is a big thing because it appears now, from what you've announced, that next year VAT is going to be nothing that we've got to be concerned about. But again, that's if everything stays as is. But just to address people at home.
Let me just say to people at home, if you look at the budget that we tabled in May, the budget that we tabled in May focus exactly on dealing with some of those issues which are pertinent to the lower income households, whether it's health services, whether it's education, whether it's services that poor people get to the municipalities. We have increased the cost of what is called of subsidizing basic services for the poor in municipalities. We're spending about 70 billion rand in order to subsidize those basic services to municipalities. We have increased the nutrition in schools. We have also provided an increase for early childhood development. So, and to increase how much the benefits for the early childhood development. So if you look at all overall, the basket of services for the poor people are well subsidized by the government in order to deal with this cost of living challenge.
I mean, and a lot of people will look to this and sort of say, you know, the government waste, which is a big problem. But you did announce some positive developments there. The 6.7 billion rand in targeted and responsible savings. I mean, that's a big thing. It sounds positive. Inflated tenders, luxury cars, endless travel, procurement, corruption, all of those kind of things. And this is one step in the right direction. However, ghost workers, this is still a very big issue. Talk to us about this. How do we get around the, I'm not even sure, it slipped out my mind how many have been found, but that's a big challenge as well, is the ghost workers.
I mean, ghost workers are a product of two things. The first one is pure incompetence, because if somebody leaves the public service, there's no reason we should not take those people off the agenda. For instance, in KZN, I'm told in the Department of Public Works, just the MEC asks people who have left what has happened to their cell phones, and you find that these people have left and the government is still paying for their cell phones. It's pure incompetence, right? The second one problem is corruption, where you keep a ghost worker, not because this individual is paying money, but the amount is getting to somebody's account who's managing that account. So we're looking at all of those issues in order to deal with corruption and also to deal with waste.
And that's a big one. And Minister, my last question to you, I know you've got to run off to a breakfast. We've got to get to the news at 8. So, but it is a good thing as well, is the establishment of a new infrastructure support agency. There's crumbling infrastructure no matter where you look and which part of South Africa you're in. How will this agency operate? And most importantly, where these funds are going to come from?
Let me give you a practical example. We've created what is called a budget facility for infrastructure, which means department and agencies come and apply for funding for specific infrastructure projects. In most cases, these infrastructure projects, it's not that they're not genuine. The problem is that when they reach us, we're not able to assess their funding because they've been poorly prepared. What this institution will do is to help these agencies and departments to prepare these infrastructure projects that come for the budget facility so that they should be well prepared for funding. That's what is going to that institution is going to do, is to help the institutions and agencies and government to present to us fundable projects.
Minister, thank you. Thank you for talking to us, and I wish you well with the rest of your day. I know it's a very busy one, but we really appreciate the time you've given us. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana talking about the medium-term budget policy statement that was announced yesterday. And it's not often we say it. It actually had some good news in it, which is something we as South Africans desperately need.